Celine Dion. I'm going to do it. I have a few Mother's Day quotes I want to share with you. I got to grow up with a mother who taught me to believe in me. Antonio Villaregosa. This one's from Stevie Wonder. Mama was my greatest teacher. A teacher of compassion, love, and fearlessness. If love is sweet as a flower, then my mother is that sweet flower of love. Very poetic. This is from Rudyard Kipling. God couldn't be everywhere, therefore he made mothers. Which we don't agree with the theory, but yes, that's why he made mothers. This one's from William Makepeace Thackeray. Mother is the name for God in the lips and hearts of little children. Abraham Lincoln. All that I am or hope to be, I owe to my angel mother. And then I'll finish with Maya Angelou. To describe my mother would be to write about a hurricane in its perfect power, or the climbing, falling colors of a rainbow. Now that's poetic. A hurricane in its perfect power. Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay. The mothership gave me an outline that has absolutely nothing to do with Mother's Day, but I wanted to spend a few minutes. Oh, we've spent quite a few minutes on that. The outline today was submitted by David Robinson, Senior Minister at CSL Olympia, and Reverend Diane Decker from CSL Kauai. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. No. Still based on Book of the Month, The Eye of the Storm. Not the eye, not, it's I.
It's
I got it on that last one.
I brought it today.
There you go.
Really? Cool.
We got it in there. We have a copy.
Okay, this will be easy. Tell us about it.
I studied
Sorry,
11 years
Steph.
ago, I can't remember.
So this week, in keeping with the theme of a storm, Gary Simmons, who wrote that book, gives us the underlying causes/beliefs that create what he calls the 4 winds of conflict. Then we'll look at the attributes of wholeness, which kind of restores our true I, even in the storm. But just like in illness or disease, the conditions in that storm of conflict are always present around us. So how we feel about ourselves, our own basic health, immune system, supports us in dealing with the conditions in a healthy or unhealthy way. When we're tired, hungry, angry, lonely, depressed, feeling insecure, our ability to deal with storm conditions goes down. That's when we are most likely to experience dis-ease, conditions that we're really not intending to create. So the 4 winds or conditions he calls separation, misperception, competition, and defensiveness. And I'll talk about each one of them. One of the themes of our teaching is the nature of God is incarnate in every soul. All are whole, perfect, and complete, just as they are. So if we're perceiving poor conditions, then we're experiencing a sense of separation from Creator. There is no separation. So where does that sense of separation come from? He says it's an effect of being born into an imperfect, caregiving environment. That somewhat sounds like a criticism of mom rather than an endorsement of mom. Most of us, many of us, weren't told as children that we were children of God. And we weren't treated as though we were children of God. Because of that, we learn to feel separate from our experiences, separate from others, and most importantly, separate from God. These patterns then create a lifestyle of defensiveness and a need for life to be treated in a certain way so that we can feel safe in ourselves and around others. That creates codependence. It's an inappropriate reliance on what's happening externally so we can experience our own self-worth, our own wholeness. But separation supports the conflict because it keeps us from experiencing ourselves as whole, perfect reflections of spirit. Misperception is another one of the 4 characteristics. He said we see things not as they are, but as we are. And that's attributed to the Talmud, the Jewish teaching. And its infinite possibilities exist for us. But misperception happens when we think that seeing is believing. Now, I might be wrong about what I'm seeing with my eyes. And we know that eyewitnesses to the same event all have different reports of what happened. As a sports fan, seems sometimes when I'm watching a sporting event, the officials didn't see the same thing I saw. I know that's hard to believe. Susan's about to fall out of her chair laughing. Even when they show it on instant replay, and I wrote this before last night. Even on instant replay, they see things differently. We see it from 5 angles, and we still disagree on what we saw. Kelly, can you put that picture up?
I sure can.
It's not last night's instant replay, is it?
No.
Thank goodness.
Is it on the screen?
You know, being
Can't you see
difficult.
it?
So what do you see here?
How what you
Everything.
see?
Exactly.
It looks
What we
different to
Talk
us.
project
nice
onto
to
the
it.
screen.
Come on, baby.
I see light in there though. Look, see the
Yeah, I
light?
see all the twinkle lights.
Everybody can see the light.
That's because you are the light.
Light in the dark.
It's persnickety, there it is.
There you go.
I just
Oh, yes.
touched it.
I've seen this.
You got the
Yeah,
touch.
I've seen this one too.
I've been touched.
Okay. Everybody sees something. Susan, what do you see?
Yeah.
Hmm?
My interpretation, I see an older woman, but
Okay. How many see an old woman?
in a fur coat.
More
But I
than
also,
that?
I also see a lion.
And
A lion?
Yeah, eating her head.
You have a lion.
And I see
How many of you see the young, beautiful? So many of you see both.
Yeah, both.
Is there anybody who can't now see the young, gorgeous, chic model? Everybody can see it?
With the feather coming out of her head.
Yeah.
Her hat.
Can everybody see the old woman?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I'm not seeing the old woman right now.
I'm not
Okay.
seeing the old woman either.
Good.
I see her, but I don't see the young woman.
I see the young
Here's her
woman.
chin. There's
Yeah.
her mouth. This is her nose. her eyes.
Oh.
Oh, I see
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Where's the young
okay.
woman?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
the young woman, start with the
She
hat.
disappears. That's her face.
And her eyelashes.
There's her
Oh, yeah, I
eyelash.
see her now.
She's
Okay.
looking away.
I see her now,
Oh, I
yeah.
see. Oh.
This is quite a psychological test.
Yeah.
I've never heard the interpretations of it. But it's amazing how we all see something different. Got it? That's the same picture, and yet we all see a young woman, an old woman, or a lion eating her head.
Yeah, that's, see the lion eating her head, I
Or
can
the
see that.
Can you show me the lion eating her head?
I saw that right away too.
See? I'm
Really?
not alone. This is the lion, that's her head.
How about a peacock after the dogs got a hold of it?
Okay. Kelly, would you put up the next one, please?
That's weird.
This is like the blue dress versus the gold dress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just click on the X on the top right, and that'll go away.
We hope.
It's just like a video.
Oh, okay, this one, I got it.
Ooh.
Oh, I see instantly.
What do
Yeah,
you
me
see?
too.
Oh,
I do
wow.
too,
Oh,
I see.
yeah.
I see 4,
2, 3, 4.
5. Yeah. They just keep popping in.
Everybody see the old people looking at each other?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But then
Everybody's-
there's a
Mexican
chalice. There's a chalice between them.
How about
No
the-
lion?
No lion, but don't you see the
I see
chalice?
the
Yeah,
chalice.
Yeah.
chalice.
How about the Mexican couple?
Come
Little
up
person
closer.
in the doorway.
Do you see the Mexicans
Yes?
Yes.
And the doorway.
And.
in the doorway?
Yeah.
Oh.
Here.
I don't see that.
See.
And the guitar?
Oh, yeah. Well, if
Oh,
you
the
see the
guitar.
Mexican couple, you see
Guitar
the
player.
guitar.
Well, it's a guitar player.
Oh.
Oh,
there.
yes, I see.
Sombrero?
Yes.
Mexican guitar?
Yes, yes.
How about
Legs.
here?
And like,
Yeah,
a
the
lady in
lady
the
in
ear.
doorway.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a doorway, it's a path.
I didn't even put up an MC Escher drawing.
Oh, yeah, those are cool.
Yeah.
Except that this is very trippy today.
Yeah. What's the painting that the woman who paints nature?
Bev Doolittle.
Bev
Bev
Doolittle
Doolittle, yeah.
excels at this.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks,
pictures
Kelly.
within pictures within pictures.
So we all have our own perception. And the thing that applies most to me is once I lock into that perception, it's difficult to change. Very difficult to change. Even in sports. But imagine that no one had the ability to judge what someone else saw. Instead, people would just ask for what they need and what's missing for them. Like, oh, we see that differently. What's missing? Well, the lion head, I didn't see it. The old woman, you have to have somebody sometimes point out the jawline, the eyes. What's missing? How can we interpret or learn what the other person sees? And how would your lifestyle, your life, be different if you were able to adopt that practice? Rather than, well, you're wrong, like I know the umpires are wrong, maybe I could ask them what they saw.
They still be wrong.
It'd be a lot easier to watch a baseball game. Well,
She said it, not me.
what did you say?
They still be wrong.
Oh, yeah. Healing, growth, come from facing our own misperceptions, our own dysfunctions. So we know what's been operating just below the surface of our own consciousness. Then we can begin to identify the existent truth for all of us, not just my perception, my interpretation, but what is the basic truth? Because we all have one truth. We have one shared truth. But since we all create our own reality, we all see things differently. So, in order to be compassionate to each other, and most importantly to ourselves, We have to allow ourselves space to understand that that's our perception. That's what we're seeing. Once we can do that for ourselves, then we can do it for others. There's an appropriate Bible verse in the King James Version of the Bible, Matthew 7:5. We can read, "Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye." That makes sense to me in this regard.
Could you say that again?
Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. A beam being a 4x4 or larger that's blocking our vision. Once we can see clearly, then we can help our brother see clearly. A moat being the moat around the castle or whatever, you know. So, anyway, in Living Science of the Mind, Dr. Holmes says, diagnosis and mental treatment is for the purpose of discovering why the person thinks as he does, upon what false premise his thought is based, what belief in the opposite of good is he entertaining. In Scientific Christian Mental Practice, Emma Curtis Hopkins says, "I will tell you that between you and your good, which belongs to you and which you ought to have, is your idea in the absence of good." That's the only thing that stands between us and our good, is our mental image, our concept, our belief in the absence of good. Another principle that Gary talks about, when what we need or value gets in the way of someone else's needs and values, conflict occurs. The danger of competition then is that there has to be a winner and a loser in competition. The loser feels diminished, angry, resentful. The winner reinforces their need to be right, which actually reinforces their inferiority, because it masks out the sense of security or adequacy. So competition comes from not knowing our inherent wholeness and living in our universe that may or may not provide everything we need, everything we value. In Science of the Mind, Dr. Holmes says, within the soul, our subjective mind, all the seeds of our thoughts fail. Someone needs more light up there. Fall. And that most of man's physical troubles, most of man's or women's physical troubles are caused by some inner conflict. So how do we define conflict? Conflict is an interference pattern of energies. Whenever there's a change, movement, resistance occurs. That's the potential for conflict. There's nothing in the universe without movement. Everything is expanding. Consciousness, energy. Each one of us is moving, changing, growing. And that's where the sense of conflict occurs. Some of us don't like change. Who are you laughing at? Yesterday here with the singing bowls, they demonstrated waves in tune, and it was beautiful, harmonious. Then they demonstrated bowls that contrasted. And every time the sound wave interfered with the other sound wave, it was dissonant. It wasn't hard to listen to, but you could tell the difference. And it was like a cat going. Conflict sets people on edge. One of the most uncomfortable feelings we have is not knowing what to do in any particular situation. And it feels scary when we don't know how to respond to a perceived threat. The author tells us, conflict does not come to us, it comes from us. It arises from within as two competing intentions. Our desire to feel safe, secure, and the desire to fulfill the soul's purpose. Resistance challenges us. Resistance causes us to grow. That's why weight training makes you stronger. It's resistance. Finally, defensiveness. By definition, defensiveness implies that we perceive an adversary and thus a threat. When we become defensive, we distance ourselves from each other and the situation we're in, and we distance ourselves from our true inner self, our true wholeness. We've created a barrier. Defensiveness is evidence in our belief of separation. I used to be a hardcore mountain biker, especially in Las Vegas. One day I was out with my buddy. We rounded a bend in the trail, and we saw a big, long, steep hill in front of us. At the exact same time, I said, "Oh good, a hill." He said, "Oh God, a hill." He was defensive. He was worried about the effort, the exertion, how he'd feel. And it was a hot day. It was probably over 100. So he had a right to be a little concerned. But he viewed the hill as a threat, literally a threat to his well-being. I looked at it as an opportunity to gain in conditioning. And then there's always the probability that we're coming back the same way and I get a free ride. So it's the attitude that we bring to a situation that makes the difference. Now those four winds are interrelated. There may be one that you identify with stronger than others. So this week, take a moment, think about what those conditions were, how they relate to what you're going through, and how you can get back to your sense of connected, whole, perfect with Source. The I am that you are is more powerful than any storm that you're going through. Now I'm halfway through, but I think we'll just call it a day. I do want to read a final. Pick that one or this one. I'll just do an affirmation. We'll call it good.
Okay.
I'll call it a Mother's Day blessing. Here's the affirmation. I am safe in any storm. The infinite power operating within and as me always supports me in every circumstance and condition. I am whole and fully sourced right now. My life is an expression of God. I experience abundance, well-being, and peace of mind now. As this is true for me, this is the truth for everyone else as well. And so it is.
So it is.